All right, so the weekend's finally over, so I really didn't want to upload a lot of Shang-Chi content, more or less because I didn't want to spoil it for anyone. I'm one of the people that I really get pissed off when I get on YouTube or Twitter and I see a headline that spoils something super important in the movie. But in this video, we're going to be talking about the Dweller of Darkness, not only the MCU version of the Dweller of Darkness, but we're also going to be talking about his Marvel counterpart, because both of these characters are extremely different from each other. So, to focus on the Marvel Dweller of Darkness, a lot of his history mirrors Cthulhu. Even his design mirrors Cthulhu to a really ridiculous extent. Squid like head, squid like tentacles, things along those lines. He's very eldritch in his design, which was the point of his creation. See, the Dwell of Darkness from the Marvel comic books comes from the sixth, I believe, iteration of the MCU. Basically, every single time the universe reaches its end, it will implode, then the Big Bang will occur again, and a new universe is born from the dying energies of the old universe. The Marvel Comics Dweller of Darkness was the catalyst for the destruction of the previous universe. There are a lot of beings in the Marvel comic book universe, especially Earth 616, who come from the previous universe, such as Galactus, the Phoenix Force. Um, I completely forgot the third one. But those are two major ones that were in the previous universe that the Dweller of Darkness led to the destruction of. Now, difference in powers. We're still focusing on the comic book version of the Dweller of Darkness. The comic book version of the Dweller of Darkness, his powers came from fear. As long as beings in the universe feared him, it not only sustained him and kept him alive, but it also increased his powers. Now, as kind of think of him kind of like as the boogeyman of sorts. As long as there were cultures out there that were aware of him, that were terrified of him, he was able to gain strength. He was defeated multiple times by Doctor Strange, to the point where his once cosmic influence was more or less only located on Earth after multiple defeats. He tried to instill this plan called the Great Fear with the other beings in the universe who fed on fear by basically turning the entire planet Earth into a fear battery. His plan failed. He was defeated, and I think he got left as like a head in a jar. But that's more or less the end of his story in Marvel Comics. Like in Marvel Comics, he only shows up like 6 times. So it's one of those things where I'm more appreciative of the MCU now, because the MCU of old would have introduced like a really big character and then had that character get killed off in the exact same movie that they were introduced in as a villain. Whereas I'm much more appreciative now that Marvel is looking at more obscure characters that people don't really know about, turning them into the big villain of the movie, and then killing them off at the end of the movie while saving their bigger villains for later outings down the line. Now his Marvel, the MCU version of him, I find to be way more interesting. Um, Especially his story in regards to Talo. So in the MCU, he's this ancient, basically interdimensional entity that steals souls. And the more and more souls that he steals, the more and more powerful he becomes. And he basically just goes from realm to realm to realm, jumping back and forth, consuming a bunch of souls and gaining power. Now, the story that they give in the movie is that the people of Talo and the Great Dragon fought him in the past, and then they were able to defeat him and seal him behind the door. I want to say, now they don't exactly go in on the door itself, but they say that the door is a doorway to another realm. I want to say the other realm is the void, and it would make the sense that it is the void. The void is more or less the space in between all of the realms. It's basically a space of darkness and also nothing and also death and also monsters. It would make the most sense that he was pushed into the void, and he more or less turned that area of the void into his den, hoping to get through the doorway to escape the void and get back into the real world. Because the version of him that we see is more or less the beaten and weakened version by the end of the movie, and he attempts to absorb the dragon, the Great Protector's soul, so that he'll reach more or less his maximum potential. But Shang-Chi and basically all the protectors of Talo were able to defeat him and kill him. So it's kind of disappointing that he dies in this movie, but I'd more or less accept his death because he went out in an origin movie. Like, if the Great Protector was the Great Protector, if the Dweller of Darkness was going to be like the main monster at the end of the road, I don't think he would make a great villain. But for a origin story villain that more or less focuses on the human interactions, family, legacy, becoming, more or less figuring out who exactly it is that you want to become, righting the wrongs of your past, discovering love, like those were the themes of the movie. And I feel as though he served as a really great villain for this type of movie. But that's it. That is the origin story for both the comic book version and the MCU version for the Dweller of Darkness. I don't think we'll ever be seeing him again in the MCU. I honestly wouldn't mind if the Soul Eaters come back, because I really think that the Soul Eaters were really, really dope. Like, as villains, like creatures that you can't kill with regular conventional weapons. When they jumped on Razor Fist and he sliced it in half and it kind of just like reformed, I thought that was like super fucking cool. But yeah, that's the video. That's the Dweller of Darkness. Peace.